The information and opinions presented in this podcast are based on research done at a particular point in time. The fields of medicine, surgery, psychology, etc. are constantly evolving as new studies and movements happen. Please take into account the year of any particular episode's publication, and as new information presents itself, we will do our best to release updated episodes on the topics. Listener discretion is advised for references to medical terminology of body parts. Unless otherwise stated, no one speaking on this podcast is a medical or legal professional and cannot provide medical or legal advice. Welcome to the Trans Field Guide. Today on the show I have Beck, a local mental health professional. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What is your general types of practice that you do, general types of counseling that you do for people?
First and foremost, my biggest professional identity is a counselor educator and also a supervisor. So I don't always get my hands, so to speak, wet in the field, but I do a lot of education on LGBTQIAAPP community. Also trying to help supervision. But my private practice that I work for is mainly trans clients, or trans-identified, or gender variant, gender questioning, also any of the spectrum of gender, and trying to figure out where to go from there. I specialize in trauma as well, so I don't always just see clients who need help with things dealing with gender, or sexual orientation. That I do a lot of trauma work. I do a lot of just life stressors and those types of things.
So do you usually have, specifically for the trans-identified or gender-y subject of counseling, do you have a lot of people that come in that are just kind of like, well, I don't know, doc, you tell me, am I trans or am I not?
I mean, I've had a couple come in like that just have no idea. They just know that they feel different and they don't feel like their identified birth gender. That doesn't connect, so there's an identification disconnect with the gender they were assigned at birth. And so most of my clients, I would say, and this is just my small group of practice, is that they know they're trans, and that's the words they use. And they're at various levels of transition, whether it's just starting the social transition to others that have started the medical transition but know that they're going to need surgeries in the future to complete some of that transition stuff, and so they need support during that time, and then also letters later on, since a lot of doctors in town are starting to waive the therapy requirement for hormones. So I'm seeing a lot more clients that are already on that hormone process of their transition, and also just the stress of identifying as trans in this community and just needing support and understanding. And I think I have a unique perspective because I don't know very many trans counselors out there. I'm very open about that, and so I think just knowing that someone might not know exactly what they're going through, but it's nice to talk to another trans person going through the process of finding their identity and how they want to navigate in the world.
Which can be super helpful. So you said that a lot of the doctors locally are waiving the requirement for a letter?
Yeah, I've noticed places like the Age Outreach Center here in Fort Worth, Texas is no longer requiring letters. They want you to talk to their counselor, but if just saying that either you've gone through therapy or that, you're in a good, stable place, then they'll waive that requirement of the actual letter. It is going along with the WPATH and their standards of care for trans people. So I think that we're going to see more and more doctors who do hormones for our community to waive that therapeutic requirement.
Do you ever have clients who are potentially in the middle of transitioning either medically or socially that realize that they identify a little bit differently than they did originally?
Yeah, our society is such a binary society, and I think that some people think, well, if I don't feel like my birth assigned gender, then I must be the complete opposite, and that means I have to identify 100%. And so I think a lot of people go into that thinking, okay, I'm going to go all in, I'm going to be 100% I'm going to do everything I can possible to be other, for lack of a better term. But I think that when they go through this process and understanding that you get to define where you want to be, what your transition looks like, and what that means for your life and how you navigate and feel in this world. And I think what's such the beauty of our time right now, even though there's a lot of discrimination and hate, but I think we're also understanding gender at a whole different level than we once were. A lot of people and a lot of research is going and talking about gender not being dichotomous, and a lot of us in this community can tell you, well, duh. But, it takes researchers a little bit longer to catch up to what people feel and things like that. So I think knowing that you don't have to pick a gender, you don't have to pick an identification, you can be fluid, you can be variant, you can be, something that's just you. And I know this is true for myself. I get to decide what I look like and how I want to be seen and what I need to do transitionally to get to those places. And I think that's just a nice, relaxing thing that you can take this at your pace as well. I think it's hard with social media and things like that, and I'm guilty of this too in the trans community, of what we're supposed to do as trans people and how we're supposed to look and what we're supposed to feel, because there's some really outspoken trans folks, not to say that there's anything bad, but we can't compare ourselves to those people. Like, we have to figure out where and what we want for our life. And I think that's what I do a lot with my clients, is trying to figure out, how do you feel and what do you need to feel more like you in your skin? So what can we do socially to get you there? And, let's try on and explore things. I mean, you can be a very feminine male or a very masculine female, or you can be something that we don't even have terms for currently, that today you wake up and you feel a little more what we consider feminine, or you feel a little bit more masculine. And I think that's the beauty, that some days I feel very feminine, even though I identify as a trans male, that, I might wear pink that day, or I might, just be allowing of my emotional experience more than some other days. And then other days I feel like, my testosterone's kicking and I'm like, don't fuck with me, world. And I think that's the beauty of being able to be who you are in the moment.
Which is definitely, I would say, definitely true with both sides of that we do have, in some ways, the really weird discourse of the people who believe that if you're going to be trans, you have to be part of a binary, and then you have the people that are like, gender is whatever. I have heard some YouTubers say things like bringing up the difference between gender expression and gender identity, and they were using it in a way to try and state that non-binary doesn't exist, because from what they were saying, it was, if you think you're non-binary, you're just talking about your gender expression, because your gender identity can only be male or female.
Yeah, I would really have to disagree with that, based on just my personal experiences and also with clients' experiences and identity. And what's cool about identity is it's yours. Like, no one can tell you that your identity or what your identity is. That's what you get to create. There's some people that identify as gray gender, and so identity is what we internally feel about this world. And I think that no one should tell them anyone's wrong if they don't identify as binary. Yes, expression is what we outwardly show to the world, and sometimes our expression might be one way at home and then one way in society because it's not safe, but your identity never changes from whether I'm able to express it or not. So, I work with this with a lot of my clients, is that their identity gets to be their own, and they get to choose what that is, or not even identify it in words or labels if that's what they prefer. I don't think anyone can tell you that's just not true. I think what they should have said, it's not true for them, but there are many people I know that identify as non-binary. I also think we need to look at generationally, too, about what we understand of gender, because my parents' generation, it's very binary. They have a hard time wrapping their head around these non-binary individuals, and I don't say that in a bad way. I just think they just don't understand. I don't know if they'll ever will. They try, but it's just something that they weren't raised with. But I think even the younger generation are coming out with terms for gender identity that I have to look up and understand, because it's new to my generation, because we didn't have that either growing up. So I think each generation is going to bring this more expansive view of gender, which is beautiful, because I think people identify a lot in different ways, and there's just not words in our society currently to allow them to say, this is who I am, even though they know what they feel inside.
Along those lines, I mean, I can glean from what you just said that you're pro all of the new terminology that's coming out that people are coming up with for these gender identities, like demi-boy, demi-girl, gray gender, agender, etc., etc., etc. Do you feel that having the ever-expansive vocabulary of genders is beneficial or negative affecting of our, as a community, ability to get visibility?
I think with the visibility piece that I just think we all just need to be vocal. I mean, I think we as a gender community can come together about expanding our understanding and awareness of gender and gender markers on legal documentation. And why do we even have to mark a box? Why is there even a box? Why can't there be a line? You know, I think that's the thing, is that people who are scared of expansion and scared of new terms, in a sense, are the ones that are speaking against that. But I think if you look at things like marriage equality, we as trans people were a part of that fight. You know, even if we identify as straight, we were still a part of that fight because we felt part of that community. Or in my case, in my transition, I was a part of that community at one time. We can, as a community, all come together. And I think that the expansion just shows that gender is so complicated, and that why be limited to these identities in our society. You know, I think people need to wake up that people have been suppressed for so long. Labels can be powerful and they can also be very hurtful. But I think with our community, once we have a label that we really identify with, it can bring a lot of power and sense of community, because we finally have a term that kind of describes what our experience in this world is. And I never see a positive term for self as a bad thing, regardless if an older generation doesn't get it or a younger generation's like, that's an old school term. My generation was one of the first to really start to take back the word queer. And, you know, I know some of my friends who are about 5-10 years older than me, and they hate that word. But that's how I identify a lot in my sexuality and things like that. And I had identified as queer in my gender expression before I furthered on in my transitions. But those are powerful words for me. That was an identity that gave me pride and gave me a language to describe my experience to those who didn't feel the same way as me.
Like this episode? Tell someone about it. Resources referenced in this episode can be found in the show notes at transfieldguide.com. Stay safe, and remember that I'm proud of you.